Good evening, everyone. My name is Will Norton, Director of the McCormack Center, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you all tonight to tonight's Executive in Residence Fireside Chat, presented by the McCormack Department of Sport Management in the Isenberg School of Management. Tonight's event serves as the keynote of our annual Executive in Residence event, and we want to thank you all for braving the snow and joining us tonight. It's fitting that tonight's hockey-themed event brought some weather. A special thanks also goes out to the entire McCormack family, whose vision and commitment to our department has helped deliver these types of exceptional experiences to our students, faculty, and alumni for the last 15 years. The Executive in Residence program is designed to bring the most influential leaders in global sport to our students, and today's guest truly stands at the pinnacle of that tradition. Gary Bettman has served as commissioner of the National Hockey League since 1993, making him the longest tenured commissioner in the major North American sports leagues. Under his leadership, the NHL has expanded its footprint, transformed its business model, reached new audiences around the world, and delivered unprecedented competitive balance and innovation. Franchise values have soared, revenue has grown more than tenfold, and the league's commitment to community impact, youth development, and the global growth of the game has never been stronger. Gary's vision has shaped modern hockey and modern sports leadership. To help guide tonight's conversation, we are equally fortunate to have Brian Burke, one of the most respected and accomplished executives in hockey.
Turn your goddamn phone off.
Brian has served as a general manager, team president, and Stanley Cup winning architect. He's also forged a reputation as a trailblazer in player safety, league operations, diversity initiatives across the sport. His decades-long perspective on leadership, culture, and the business of hockey make him the perfect partner for tonight's discussion. After the discussion, we will open things up to the crowd for questions, and if you have questions for our esteemed guests, you can DM us on X or Instagram at the handle on the screen above at McCormack UMass, and we will screen some of those questions and get them to our guests. So with that, please join me in welcoming NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman and Brian Burke to the stage.
Thank you. Thanks for the great turnout on a snowy night, and thanks for the kind introduction. I want to welcome Gary not just as a famous executive, but as a friend, a mentor, and a leader. A great parent, great family guy, so it's great to have you here, boss.
It's great to be with you. It's great to be here. I had a wonderful day being in residence. It was an honor and a privilege to be here. The snow is always a nice touch when you're in the Berkshires. And one thing you left out on his resume, he's not bashful, as you heard from the comment.
So let's talk about your campus experience yourself. Tell the people here, I'm interested with young people, a little bit about your background, where you went to college, where you went to law school.
Sure, and since I'm used to getting booed, you'll feel free to do it. I went to Cornell University. Well, hostile audience, I can take it. I have a Bachelor in Science in Industrial and Labor Relations from the ILR school. When I went there during the Stone Age, which would have been between 70 and 74, it was known principally at that stage as a pre-law prep to get into law school. I went from there to NYU Law School. I practiced law at one of the large New York firms as a litigator. I wound up shortly thereafter as the Assistant General Counsel of the NBA. I was, I will say, in 1981, the 25th employee, including support staff. When I left 12 years later to lead the NHL, the NBA had 700 employees, and it was the decade in which I was there, in which all sports leagues, largely with David Stern's inspiration, figured out that we were more than just scheduling arms and negotiating national TV contracts. We were major media and entertainment companies, and there were a whole lot of assets we needed to be giving access to our fans too. And in 1993, I started as the NHL's first commissioner. They had previously had presidents, but as I was trying to reform the NHL and modernize it, I wanted us to look like the other major sports leagues, and I said, you got to change my title. And the rest, as they say, is history. Although you were a little off on the numbers, I don't mean to contradict you. Revenues have grown not tenfold, but closer to 20-fold since I've been commissioner, but that's okay.
Come on, Will.
You know, my first year as commissioner, the league was doing, if you can believe this, the entire league and all the clubs, $438 million. This year, we'll do 7.2, 7.3 billion. So 20 is probably a little high, but you got the point.
Come on, Will, sharpen up there.
Okay. See, he's not bashful.
I'm going to come back to that in a second, but tell us a little bit about why you left the league. When you left to go to the NHL, you had a pretty good setup working for a guy you thought very highly of, David Stern. Tell us about that decision.
Well, David was my mentor, and in the conversations, David had to let me out of my contract. I was general counsel at the NBA at the ripe old age of 32. When I would run league meetings with the lawyers, I was typically the youngest person in the room by 25 years, and I had a great boss and a great mentor. And the NHL was in need of somebody to take over and try and modernize. The owners liked what the NBA was doing, which is, I guess, one of the reasons they came knocking on the door. And David repeatedly said, you don't have to do this. You can stay here with me forever. Maybe at some point you could even succeed me. But I was given an opportunity to do my own thing, to be the person who had to make the final decisions. And I didn't think it was an opportunity that I could miss. And again, going back to the first question, I had a passion for hockey. I went to Cornell, which, like this place, excelled in hockey. And I was a fan, and I figured, this was a great opportunity. And yeah, at 39 years old, it could have been a disaster, because if it didn't work out after 3 or 4 or 5 years, I would have been in my mid-40s trying to figure out my career. But I had enough confidence and enough passion and enough desire to give it a shot. And you can't really achieve any level of success, not that I have or that this is what it's about, but you got to take chances. They have to be well measured. You have to do your homework, but taking chances, isn't that what life's all about?
So my first experience with Gary Bettman was I called Bob Stein. They said, we're talking to Gary Bettman about coming and running your league.
They need to know who Bob Stein is.
I'm going to get to that in a
Okay,
second.
just want to make sure. I didn't want you to get lost.
Problem with the commissioner, he thinks he's running everything all the time.
I'm
And
not?
he is. So I called Bob Stein, who was a former Viking, former linebacker for the Minnesota Vikings, who had married into the Taylor family and was president of the Minnesota Timberwolves. So I said, who's this Bettman guy? We have a chance to get him. And he said, oh, get him. You have a chance to get Gary Bettman. He'll be a star. That was the first experience. I reported that back to my owner and said, let's get this guy. So my first impression, he was very favorable.
Now, do you remember our first encounter the night I got elected? You were at the bar, not shockingly, at the Breakers where the meeting was, and I strolled into the bar, and the first thing Brian said to me was, I'll clean this up a little bit. They're going to love you. You're short, you're from basketball, and you're a New York lawyer. Good luck.
That's true. But I told him also I would do anything I could to help him.
And you have, and you've been good to your word, and you've been a great friend.
Well, you've been a great friend, too. So going back to that, I'm big on process, on how you got there. And going back, so now you've got a chance to work for a league that was, the Big Four was, a lot of people felt the Big Four, the fourth team was NASCAR. NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, NASCAR. We were kind of on the outside.
Some people thought we were the fourth, but yeah, you're right. It was
Brand
more
challenge.
questionable. Yeah.
So what did you think about that? People tell you don't think about it?
No, it was more that I believe that there was tremendous upside, that this was a great sport, great people. Our athletes are amazing, and I always believed that we were underexposed, underpresented, and that we had assets that could be marshaled better than they ever had been, because the NHL wasn't doing the things that the other sports were in terms of licensing, sponsorship, media. And remember, this was all then when I took over, they really didn't have a major media contract. I mean, they're just going back to ESPN. This was at a time that was before cell phones. Most of you probably think that that's ridiculous. How could there ever have been such a thing? There were no cell phones. There were no websites. Email was just beginning to be a thing. There was no social media platforms. And we weren't even doing the basics with what you could do at the time. And sports leagues were really focusing on the fact that it was more than just putting on the games. There was more to be done with the business as an entertainment property, because after all, while we're sports, we're also competing with other forms of entertainment.
I remember the league, my first year working for the league, which was 92, 93 to 98. Gary had a seminar for us on how to use email.
And then for some of the less discreet people, I had to teach them how to not use email, because, you know, email became a funny thing in litigation. All of a sudden, there'd be a pile of documents that weren't as formal as letters, and you go, I really wrote that? And so I had to cut some people off from their email access.
So now the next thing would be the history of labor negotiations under your tenure. A lot of people, I think, who don't know would say there's been a lot of acrimony, and I was involved. I was on your side. I felt the league was, the union was unreasonable at all times.
Aren't unions always unreasonable?
Yeah. No, but going back.
That's a joke. Too many people on the union side here. You're making me nervous. So let me. So I had come obviously from the NBA, and I was instrumental in implementing the first salary cap in professional sports. You know, it had been conceptually agreed to by David Stern and Larry Fleischer, who was then heading the NBA Players Association, but nobody had any idea how it was going to work. And one of my colleagues said to me after they made the agreement, he goes, we're going to get a long-term employment run out of this, because we were the ones, I was the one who had to figure out how to make it work. In the course of that, and I guess 2 Mondays ago, I was on Monday Night Football with Jerry Jones, because we're going to do a game at AT&T Stadium, and he was talking about the fact that he had met me 40 years ago because he came on behalf of the NFL and wanted to understand how our salary cap worked. And I assumed that was one of the attractions, based on how the NBA was doing in general and the salary cap. That was one of the attractions that made me desirable from the search committee that was looking for a new president/commissioner. And so when they hired me, I was first getting to know the owners. Our first collective bargaining agreement that I inherited was expiring in about 1.5 years after I got there. And we wanted a salary cap, and I raised it with the union, and the union said absolutely not, because that's what unions do. And we ultimately had a work stoppage because we didn't have a new collective bargaining agreement. I didn't know the owners in 1.5 years as well as I came to know them. And before we had the work stoppage, I was in a board meeting and said, listen, players are fierce competitors. They're not going down easily. If we start the work stoppage, we better be ready to finish it, which means you got to be prepared to lose a season. And everybody needs to understand that. All those in favor? Aye, go get him, Tiger. Okay. And then the next day I got 6 calls saying, you know, I really didn't mean it. I can't get through the season if we don't play within 2 months.
We're out of business.
We're out of business. I mean, and so now I had the unenviable task of having to cut a deal knowing that the limb had been sought out from behind me. And so I did the best I could to make a collective bargaining agreement that didn't accomplish the goals that we had. We then went through a period where teams were struggling. There was franchise instability. Teams couldn't afford to be competitive. Most teams were losing money. And so now I had a bunch of new owners who I brought in, got rid of some of the old ones because they couldn't afford to be in. And to make a long story short, I made all the preparations necessary to lose a season if we had to. And this time I went to the union and said we had to have a salary cap, and we're not going to play unless we get one. Salary cap coupled with revenue sharing, where that way all clubs could be in a position to compete. The union and the union leader at the time was a gentleman named Bob Goodnow, captained the Harvard hockey team we played there between 70 and 74. I guess he captained it as a senior. He had been a lawyer as well. He was a Teamster organizer, and he was tough. And he said, no way. And he believed because every collective bargaining agreement that wasn't reached, every collective bargaining that resulted in sports in the prior 20 years, when they didn't reach an agreement ultimately and there was a work stoppage, the owners ultimately caved and didn't do it. So nobody took the threat seriously. They were going to wait us out and wait for the owners to cave. And then sometime around February 1st, when it was clear we couldn't have a season, I canceled the season. And there was horror. The union and the union leader couldn't believe we had done that. Media suggested, and a lot of fans, that we'd never come back from it. How can you cancel a whole entire season? No major sport has ever done that. But we did. And then the players started getting a little antsy because we said, and by the way, if we don't get a salary cap, we're not opening next season. And so the strategy of waiting us out kind of turned. Players...
Turn off your goddamn phone.
Yeah, oh.
At least you have your phone
Whoa.
on.
That's so... I hope it was important or not important. Anyway, so the players, I think significant others were getting a little antsy about having the players home all day. I think they were getting antsy about no paychecks. I think the players were tired of babysitting. And more importantly, and not to make light of it, if you have a career as a professional athlete that on average is, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, giving up 1 year, maybe you'll do unhappily in support of the union. Giving up 2 years, you're basically done. And you don't want to do that in your prime. And we ultimately made a deal for the following season, which included a salary cap and revenue sharing. The deal we made then was 57-43% because we gave a little more than perhaps we should have to get back to work. And then the next round of bargaining in 2012 said we got to go to 50-50. Economics at 57% weren't good enough. And by the way, basketball and football are at 50-50, and that's the right number. And same routine. And I said, I'm going to cancel the season again. And I mean it. And the deadline, the owners were saying, set the deadline as December 1st. And I said, nobody's going to believe we're going to cancel the season at December 1st. We got to wait this out until late January or February. And a lot of gnashing of teeth, but that's what we did. And then the union, on the eve of whatever that deadline was, came in and made a deal. Then, by the way, the first executive director got fired after the year-long work stoppage. No strategy for year 2. Donald Fear, who had been at baseball, ultimately replaced him after there were 2 or 3 other people in the interim, all of whom got fired. It was dangerous to be on the other side of the bargaining table with me. Don Fear had been at baseball and been through a number of work stoppages, was the one there for 2012, and ultimately, after that work stoppage, we made a deal. When COVID started, we needed to do some work together, and Don was really great and responsive, and we actually worked out how we were going to get through COVID, and we extended the collective bargaining agreement by, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And then Don retired, and he was replaced by Marty Walsh, Well known in Massachusetts as a union leader, the mayor of Boston, Secretary of Labor in the Biden administration. He came to run the union, and he has been a great friend and a great partner. No pushover, fierce advocate for the players, but he understands the importance of working together to grow the game for everybody's benefit. And so the last 2 rounds of collective bargaining, no work stoppage, labor peace, the game has thrived, the players have done well, the owners have done well, and most importantly, the fans have done well because the game's never been better.
Well, 2 things. One, I want to mention the rule change that you implemented as part of the new deal, part of the new salary cap, but also you mentioned twice revenue sharing and salary floor. You didn't mention floor, but I'd like you to explain those features. I don't think the average fan understands that.
So, and in a lot of the discussions, and if you heard me earlier today, I apologize for you having to listen to it again, but if I have to say it again, you can listen. So what happened in the late 90s and early 2000s, before we took the year off, as I euphemistically call the year-long lockout and season cancellation, is the game wasn't very good. And the reason the game wasn't very good was because we had a disparity in what teams were spending and could afford to spend on payrolls that was unsustainable. We had teams with $90 million payrolls. Think about that. 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, $90 million payrolls. The cap this year is only $95 million. Okay? And that was 20 years ago. And then we had teams with $20 million payrolls. And I would talk to the coaches of the $20 million teams and go, how do you compete against a $90 million team that has lines skating with 5 future Hall of Famers? And the response was, we clutch, we grab, we hook, we hold. And in effect, that's a euphemism for neutralizing the skill that we don't have. And we do that for 50 minutes, and we try to steal the game, generally unsuccessfully, but we try to steal the game in the last 10 minutes. Made for boring hockey, no lead changes. The last Stanley Cup final that we had before the year-long work stoppage, the first team that scored a goal won the game, and there was never any lead changes. And so the game wasn't particularly entertaining, and the players weren't having fun playing it. Made no sense. And that gave me the determination that we had to fix that, and the solution was a league-wide salary cap based on revenues, which were accounted for by independent parties, team salary cap, hard cap, player salary cap, and revenue sharing made sure that everybody could afford to compete. And we said, in addition to the cap, there had to be a floor, that everybody had to be within a range, $15, $20 million, so that everybody was icing a competitive team. The end result of that has been we made some rule changes that emphasize speed and skill. We changed the officiating standard to emphasize skill. And the end result is the game has never been healthier. If you look at the game now, you look at our standings, maybe 1 or 2 clubs aren't in the hunt, but every team at the beginning of the season has a shot at making the playoffs. And if you're a hockey fan, you know once the playoffs begin, anything can happen. We have the best first round in any playoffs in any sport, and it goes on from there. And so this season, for example, 52% of our games are tied at some point in the third period. We are setting a record for comeback wins. We're setting a record for multi-goal comeback wins, all because it's about speed and skill and the aspects of our game that make it exciting and edgy and most of all entertaining. As a result, we're playing to 96 or 97% attendance, and this has been built over time. Our national TV ratings, I think, are up 28%. Our revenues are going to set a record high. But what was also interesting, if you go back to the year off, most media had written us off as dead. The NHL was dead, was never coming back. I was an idiot for killing it, and all the good things that come from that result on me getting booed every time I go on the ice. But we actually, our fans understood that we took harsh medicine and we fixed the problem. We didn't put a Band-Aid on it. We got a salary cap. We had revenue sharing. Everybody could afford to be competitive. And guess what? In the first and only time in the annals of business, any business, we were shut down for a year and came back to record revenues, record attendance, record customers, and record ratings. All because our fans, no matter what market you were in, small market, Canadian club, small market, U.S. team, big market, everybody had a chance. And that engaged our fans like nothing else. And it's the reason I believe we have the best competitive balance in all of professional sports.
It truly changed the way the game was played and watched. It truly changed it. Okay, so let's finish up on collective bargaining. The LTIR exemption, the way the people could go over the cap in the old days, the playoff cap. Talk about that briefly, and then we'll move on to something more interesting. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I love this stuff.
It's a little technical. It used to be you could replace a player who was out long-term injury at 100%. And the union, when we agreed to the cap, wouldn't agree to have a cap in the playoffs. They figured you get through the season, anything goes in the playoffs. I don't believe teams were messing around and they were lying. And when they invoked the long-term injury exception, we had our independent doctors check out the players. But miraculously, a number of the players who missed an entire season were back and ready for the playoffs. Now,
Amazing.
you know what? What was amazing is they were genuinely hurt. Could they have come back a couple of weeks or a month earlier? Maybe. So we plugged that hole in this round of bargaining. And if you take 100% on the long-term injury exception, the player is gone for the season and the playoffs. If you take a short-term injury exception, which is like around the league average salary, you can bring a player back. But for every game, whatever you have on your roster, but for every game in the playoffs, you have to be cap compliant. So we plugged that hole, and I think it was more a perceptional problem, but we fixed the perception.
Yeah, I think it was a perceptional problem. I think that's important you cover that off because we're talking about collective bargaining. I think it was a major thing for fans,
Yeah.
even though.
Yeah, no, listen, we're in the perception business as much as anything. When you're in the sports, it's perception, it's authenticity, it's integrity. You better have those things intact or your fans aren't going to be too happy with you. And those are our priorities. And with everything we've done and everything we do to market and promote and stream and get our players involved and stuff, it starts with the product on the ice. And if the game isn't fun, fast, entertaining, authentic, you don't have any, you can market it till midnight, but that's not going to cover up for the weaknesses in the game.
We don't want to forget a very important person in this room is our famous coach from UMass, Coach Carville. Thanks for being here today.
Yes. Aren't you supposed to be running a practice? The players must be very happy that you're here then.
Okay, so one more thing about collective bargaining agreement. I said I was done, but I'm not.
Clearly.
During all this work stuff, did you manage to grow the league? You added teams in Minnesota.
Well, when I came into the league, we were at 24 teams. We're now at 32. Actually, we grew the teams before we had the year-long work stoppage. We had expanded, but I embargoed the money that teams get, so I used it as a fund to get through the work stoppage in case any clubs ran out of money, because I had learned my lesson from the first time when the 6 clubs said, no, we were kidding, we couldn't make it. It was all part of, people ask me about that decision. The decision based on what I described, the state of the game was, and the economics of the game, the decision to do what we did was easy. The hard part was executing and making sure I could hold the owners together, that all clubs could get through it, and that there'd be life at the other end of the tunnel. That's the hard part. And, there's a famous quote that's attributed to somebody, but vision, leadership without execution is nothing more than a hallucination. And I had to make sure that we weren't hallucinating, that we were doing the real thing.
That might have been Ben Franklin.
I think so, but I heard it from Walter Isaacson quoting Ben Franklin. Walter Isaacson, who wrote the Jobs and Musk biographies.
I had no idea who it was. I was just being a smart ass.
Yeah, I understand. Well, you had heard me say this before. And then you said, I don't know if you made it up, that it was Ben Franklin who insisted that people learn how to swim because too many people
True
in that
story.
age were drowning because they didn't know how to swim.
True story.
Oh, if you
First
say so.
expert on water
Mm,
safety was
yeah.
Benjamin Franklin.
There you go.
True story. Okay, so come back if we would. Expansion, you added 93.
Done with collective bargaining?
Well,
You sure?
We got time.
Okay. No, that's okay. Let's go.
We added Ottawa, or added Tampa Bay and Hartford,
Well, that was before me.
93.
That was just before me. Tampa and Ottawa came into the
Right.
league,
Okay, and then
and
year
then
four
the day before I was elected commissioner, there was an expansion to South Florida, Wayne Huizenga Blockbuster, and Anaheim with Disney. There's actually an anecdote on that, which in the course of the day I never managed to tell. So I'm elected.
That's interviewing skill.
Yeah, yes, it is, and you're quite good at it. So I'm elected commissioner in mid-December of '92, and I'm scheduled to take over on February 1st, '93. And the reason for that is David Stern insisted that I wait 6 weeks, not because he was worried about me cleaning up at the NBA, but he wanted to give me 6 weeks to adjust to the new league without being responsible. It was very smart on his part, and I was grateful that he did that. But so the expansion was announced, and everybody was hailing that this is a great new era of Blockbuster's investing in the league, Disney's investing in the league. They have a new commissioner, no longer called president. It's all going to be great. And then what happens is Wayne Huizenga and Michael Eisner, who was running Disney, were in pushovers, and they say, we don't like the terms of the expansion draft that you're giving us. We want a deeper pool of players to draft. And nothing had been agreed to in writing. They simply, before me by a day, went off and announced that they were doing this. And there were a number of old school owners who said, we're not changing the expansion draft. Too bad if they don't want the team. And I'm now thinking to myself, wait a minute. So I've now just taken over what I thought was a mess, which is about to be a bigger mess, because all of this glow was about to be dissipated and we were going to look like amateur hour, which we were at the time. And so they called a board meeting for, I don't know what day of the week New Year's was, but it was the day after New Year's Day, first business day. And I decided I needed to go to the board meeting even though I hadn't started yet, because this was a disaster and arguments back and forth at the board. And I had done a little bit of a head count as to whether or not it was going to pass. And I said to the board, you can't not do this. You're in this position to success. And doing a little bit of politic counting, I realized there was one swing vote that was going to determine it. And the team that was on the bubble happened to be owned by the brother of somebody who owned an NBA team. And I knew the lawyer who was at the meeting representing the San Jose Sharks. And I said to him, you can't do this to the league. You can't do this to me. He was actually a friend. He had lent me a ski house in Vermont a number of times. And I said, you got to do this. And he did. And the resolution passed by one vote. And the old line owners went berserk. Not that they could do anything about it. They went berserk over two things. One, they didn't like the end result. And two, that I had already outmaneuvered them politically. But that was just setting a tone.
So then on your watch, they added Columbus, Minnesota,
Atlanta.
Carolina, Atlanta.
Not Carolina. Carolina was the relocation.
Oh, that's Jimmy.
From Hartford.
Yeah.
Fl-
Carolina, or not Carolina, sorry.
No, Minnesota,
Yeah, Columbus.
Nashville,
Asheville.
And Arizona, no, not Arizona. Arizona was the relocation from Winnipeg. John, help me out. Who's the fourth one? Atlanta? No, Florida was the one the day before me. That was the blockbuster story. It was Minnesota, Atlanta, Nashville, and
Columbus.
Columbus. And Columbus.
Okay,
See,
there we
people
go.
always forget about Columbus. And they had 95,000 people at Ohio State. People shouldn't forget about Columbus for an outdoor game.
Who won that game?
What? Columbus did.
I
Against
know,
Detroit.
Ohio State spanked them.
No, it was good. Anyway, so we admitted 4 new clubs. We have teams in places like Texas, played a game in the Cotton Bowl in front of 85,000 people. Our teams do well wherever they are. Now, why do we expand? Again, people want to know if we're going to expand. You really look at 4 criteria, 10,000 feet, as to whether or not you should expand. We have the talent to do it. We could, and we have less U.S. teams than the other 3 major sports because of our 32 teams. 7 are in Canada. And we're tripled up in the New York market and doubled up in Southern California. So our footprint is a little bit more shallow than the other major sports leagues. Okay. So what I look for and what I tell everybody, and we've gotten lots of expressions of interest from places like Atlanta and Dallas and Quebec City and Kansas City and on and on. Most important thing for any franchise in any sport, ownership. Second, market. It's going to be a good market. You know, we decided to go to Las Vegas. It was at the time the largest U.S. city that didn't have one of the 4 major sports. And we believe that people in Las Vegas, they don't, if you live there, you don't identify with the Strip. That's not your raison d'etre. It's, you happen to live there and maybe you make money off of it, but that's not what you want. They wanted a team. And the team has been hugely successful. And while we were ridiculed by everyone to go to Vegas first, now everybody else thinks they invented it. But that's okay. And so market. Third, need to be an arena. Okay, you need that. We had problems from day one in Arizona because we didn't have a suitable arena. And fourth, will it make the league stronger? If we have a team in Atlanta or Houston, both I think are top 10 population markets in the United States, more people in those markets are going to probably engage either on linear television or on platforms. So that might make us stronger. If somebody comes in and says, here's how we check those 4 boxes, then we'd have a deeper dive, take it to the owners and see if they wanted to expand. It's not something we feel we have to do, but under the right circumstances, if it made sense, it's something we would consider doing.
Okay, I was going to come back to expansion after this question, but let's talk about the pandemic. I think in many ways it was your finest moment. I know you won't agree, but I think it was. I think it was sheer genius how we pulled this off. I say we, using a collective pronoun, deserving no credit whatsoever for what happened, but I still say we.
No, that's because you have been and will always be part of the hockey family. So pandemic starts. And I remember I walked into my house the night the NBA had a full arena and Rudy, somebody or other, made fun of the fact that, you know, COVID was a thing, and then it turned out he tested positive, and they didn't play the game, and they emptied the arena. And I had just walked into the house, and somebody had called and said, you better turn on your TV to see what's going on. And I did. And I said, okay, I don't want to be in a situation where we have an arena full of people and I have to send them home. I said, so we're going to postpone the rest of the season tomorrow. I got on the phone, called the owners, gave them a heads up. Now, that entire week, we had been in discussions with the officials at a variety of jurisdictions who were thinking of closing down arenas and not letting large numbers of people gather. And we were day by day getting through it. But after watching the NBA's experience, I said, no, we're not going to do it this way. We're going to do it in an orderly fashion. And that night, I drew down $1 billion line of credit because we had lines of credit that were unused. And I figured I should draw it down before I announced that we weren't playing for the rest of the season. And I wanted to have plenty of money in the bank to get through the season.
Well, that's, I have to interrupt. That's a little bit of vision on your part, having that availability.
Well, yeah, I guess. No, the vision was drawing it down before I made the announcement.
Having it in place shows a little bit of vision too.
Yeah,
Anyway,
well, okay.
Typical Bettman.
So then we announced it, and then I had a number of owners say, okay, we're just going to shut down and wait till this is all over. And I go, no, we have to come back at some point and finish the season. You can't, baseball didn't finish the season when they lost the World Series in, I think it was 95 or 96. It took them 10 years to recover because people get financially and emotionally invested in the season. It's like watching a movie and the reel breaks and you don't get to see the last 10 minutes of the movie. You get very angry. And I said, we're going to have to figure out a way to finish this season. And that's when we decided to do the bubbles. And we looked at, I don't know, a dozen cities and ultimately concluded that we could pull off the bubbles in Toronto and in Edmonton based on hotel availability and the fact that COVID, which we were tracking in every city. I mean, we were on the phone with the president, as with the other sports leagues, with Fauci, I never wanted to be a doctor. Okay, that's why I went to the school I went to and studied what I did. But I got a medical education and became an expert on testing and COVID and spreadability and all that. So we ultimately decided that the COVID rates were the lowest in Toronto and in Edmonton of all the cities in North America we were considering. We needed an exemption from the government to get in because we were bringing people in from all over. We were testing like crazy. We had the players quarantine at home and test daily for, I think, a week before we put them in the bubble. Because if you put somebody with COVID in the bubble, you will have burst the bubble, for lack of a better term. And we did the two bubbles. We finished the regular season on some basis or had some playoff format on some basis. We got to the conference finals and we moved everybody to Edmonton. Meanwhile, everybody was being tested every day. I think we administered 34,000 tests and not one positive. And we played the Stanley Cup final, Tampa against Dallas, I believe it was, in an empty building. By the way, I was never more convinced as to the importance of our fans and why we could never be a studio game. The game and the players actually get energy from the fans in the building. It's part of why our in-person experience is the best. And the players were great, and they went through it. Some players were in the bubble for 2 months, away from their families and their wives and kids, and they sacrificed to do it. I spent 3 weeks in the bubble in Edmonton, and the requirement, if you were coming into the bubble, you had a quarantine for 3 days, couldn't leave your room. It was like, being in the bubble was like being, not that I was ever in one, but I envisioned it was like a minimum security prison, except the only difference, you had your cell, but unlike that, once you cleared the first 3 days, you could leave your cell and walk around. We had a yard. We had people who, we had food trucks there. We had people who made bonfires at night. I mean, it was bizarre.
They're nothing similar, Gary.
No, well,
The same at all.
well, no, I meant in terms of restriction of movement. You are not. So we had somebody who thought it.
I'm being a smartass again.
No, but we had somebody from NHL staff who thought he was having a heart attack. Had to go to the hospital. He was okay, but he had to quarantine again for 3 days to get back into the bubble. We were really strict and rigid, and at the end of the day, the next season, we started late. We only played 56 games, and we weren't allowed to cross the border. So we had to create a Canadian division and a U.S. division, and some cities you were allowed to have people in the stands. Some you were playing at limited capacity. Some You could have some people, but you couldn't serve food. I don't know why, but you couldn't serve food. And we limped through the second season, and players got paid. We had a
Got
big.
paid 100%.
They got paid 100%, but they owed us what we overpaid, which we got over time, which is why the escrow was large, and we thought it would take 4 years to get paid back. I think we got paid back in 2. Players owed us about $1.5 billion, but we had paid them for the seasons in question and withheld the escrow, and it all sorted out. One of the reasons the cap has been jumping as much as it has, for those of you who are a hockey fan, is we're still getting it back to the level it should be, because we went for 3 or 4 years where the cap only went up $1 million so that we would keep the escrow down and get paid back.
And see, that's why I think it's your finest moment and the league's finest moment. The vision to figure that out and prepay the players and pay them in full, 56 games, unbelievable, whole thing, unbelievable.
Thanks. You know what? You do what you have to do.
No, I don't think
and
so.
you got to figure out what it is.
I think a lot of people just fold. I think a lot of people just.
Well, but part of the issue was, much like the year off, I had to persuade the owners that it was the right thing to do. And, you know, we're going to be owed $1.5 billion. I said, our projections will be, we'll get it back. Everything will be fine. But we would lose our major league status if we didn't come back and play. That's what our fans deserve. That's what they demand. That's what they're entitled to.
I was working in TV at the time. I predicted confidently that the season was over. The players would never get full pay. I looked stupid on both of them. I'm very happy to look stupid on both of them.
You never look stupid. It's just sometimes your prognostications are a little askew.
Oh, okay. I feel better.
I'm sure you do.
Okay, so let's talk about philanthropy. You know it's a big thing for me. It's a big thing for you. Our league has a reputation for being philanthropic, community-oriented, community-involved. Tell us about that. Why is that such a mission for you?
Well, it's also our players are like that. Our players get involved in the communities that they're in. They set up foundations. They buy suites for children that have cancer. They go to hospitals. They do everything. I believe that sports has a platform that can make a difference in people's lives, and we have an obligation to do that, whether it's being more welcoming to groups of people, whatever their background, that haven't been connected to hockey, whether it's important causes. We've hooked up with the V Foundation. Hockey Fights Cancer, I think, is 25 years old and has raised $25 million. And in the last 2 years with the V Foundation, I think we've raised $8 million, give or take, in conjunction with them, power of being stronger. We have grassroots programs. We have education programs, STEM programs, using hockey to get kids more interested in the STEM curriculum. These are all things that we can do. We established, which we got basically every hockey governing body in the world to sign on to, a declaration of principles. What do we stand for? We stand for being welcoming, inclusive. We stand for leadership, teamwork, collaboration, physical fitness, getting an education, making sure that young people understand that if you're part of the game, this is what you will get in your life, and hopefully it makes a difference in your life growing up. And we spend a lot of money, we spend a lot of effort, as do our teams in their communities, doing all of these things on a regular basis, again, to be a part of the community that we're in. You know, I wasn't being glib when I said you were, Brian, and you'll always be part of the hockey family. We view ourselves as a family, and we rally around people and causes that we can help.
I think it's a major feature that most people don't see the reach of. But even on international catastrophes like Hurricane Katrina, you guys stepped up.
Yeah, but sometimes donating money is the easiest thing you can do. Okay, but that's not the most long-lasting. That just gets you through a point. The other efforts we do are intended to be long-term and make a meaningful difference. And when we put on a big event, an outdoor game or an all-star game, we generally try to leave a legacy project behind. Maybe a ball hockey rink. Maybe we refurbish an ice rink that's too old. Maybe we, create a program or a room at a kid's hospital where if they're being treated, they can get away from the nurses and doctors and talk to a player, by FaceTime. These are all things where, yeah, maybe it's one person at a time, but it makes a difference.
I think it's huge. I don't think the average person understands the commitment that you've displayed and the league has displayed. I think it's wonderful. One of my favorite parts of being involved in hockey is the philanthropy. I love it.
Well, you on an individual basis, like so many other executives, take it upon yourself to take up the causes that are important to you.
Well, I think leadership is a huge part of that. But anyway, I'm going to keep an eye on time here. How are we doing? No, I got a couple more.
Then why did you ask him? Just ask your questions.
No, I said, are we doing on time? I didn't say, am I done talking?
How we're
I
doing
didn't
on
say,
time.
am I done on talking? I have the mic. Anyway,
Okay, you got
Some
two more
advi-
questions.
advice?
And then the audience.
advice for the young people here.
You,
How do you get a job in being a commissioner?
yeah,
I'm
I-
kidding. Working
no,
in sports.
I had the experience and qualifications that made me a desirable candidate. Okay, but the fact is, I had a great education, and you're all getting a great education. You have to have a passion for what you're doing. You can't be successful if every day you wake up and you dread going to work. It should be something that's meaningful to you and that you're excited to do. Yes, I know it's work, but at the end of the day, it's less work and more about passion if it's something you really want to be doing. So set yourself up, get an education, nothing's more important, and go out into the world and look for opportunities and network and meet people and treat people well, because you never know who you meet and what difference they make in your life, because life is full of happenstance and serendipity, and you want to be nice to the people that you meet in your life, because maybe you're on the way up, but you also don't want them helping you on the way down if you haven't been nice to them. And so it's about education, it's about an opportunity, and also you're all young enough, if you start on one career path and you don't like it, don't think about doing that for the next 40 years. Before you have major responsibilities, think about what else you should be doing that would really make you feel good about what your existence is. And by the way, yes, there needs to be a work-life balance, okay? Because you can't let your job, it can be important. I think what I do is important, but I don't let it completely define me. I have a family that's more important to me than the job. I've been married for more than 50 years, which in this day and age, yes, I got married when I was 6, okay? No, but the point of it all is, you're about to embark on a journey when you leave this place. Don't do it with blinders on. Have a world view and look at all the opportunities, both in terms of your working life and your non-working life.
I can't say that any better. Okay, last question for me. The future of the NHL. What do you see?
I think the future is exciting. Our growth potential is unlimited. I think because the game has never been better and the opportunities to bring it to more people in more ways using technology has never been greater, we need to continue to evolve with the times, which is something we're trying to do. And I've never been more bullish in my 3+ decades.
Awesome. Let's open this up.
All right, great. We got a lot of good questions coming in. So the first one, how has the league addressed the legality of sports betting, and how does it approach partnerships with sports gambling platforms? With the recent NBA gambling scandals, does the NHL worry that there might be a possibility of similar issues in the league?
Gambling scandals, no bueno. Not good. So let me give you a little bit of history. When I was general counsel of the NBA, so we're going back more than 3 decades, I was one of the people very involved with the passage of PASPA. PASPA was the legislation that said, unless you were a state that already had sports betting, and there were only a handful, you can't do sports betting, end of story, we're closing the door. And then, lo and behold, 25 years later, thanks to a lawsuit brought by Governor Christie in New Jersey, the Supreme Court invalidated PASPA, and we got sports betting. Now, I think there are some things about sports betting that aren't terrific, changes the focus of the game, scrutiny. You have allegations of doing things you shouldn't do in games as a player in other sports. But it's a reality of life, and it's legal. And so what are the benefits? Well, we've had to do it. Everybody else is doing it because there are fans who want to engage. And you want your fans to be able to engage in your sport the way they engage in other sports. I get that. Is there a benefit to legalized versus illegal sports betting? Yes. There's more control. You can monitor it more closely, and I get that. And that's something we do. I don't think our game particularly lends itself the way some of the other sports. We're more team-centric. There's more things happening at a faster pace, nonstop. And so while it's obviously something we have to monitor closely, I think we're less susceptible to it. But I will tell you, we monitor every second of every game statistically using data, and we monitor the betting lines in conjunction and cooperation with the betting companies, so we know if there are any aberrations in any of the betting lines and whether or not it correlates with anything that's going on in the game. So it's something we take very seriously. Our players are not allowed to bet on hockey, period, end of story. If they do, they got to come see me, and it won't be pleasant. And by the way, if they do that, they're liable to be out of their careers and maybe in jail. So they shouldn't do that. Did you also, and yes, we also just made deals in the prediction contract market with Polymarket and Kalshi, and we were the first league to do it. And the reason is, A, we wanted them using real data, so there was no dispute about the results of contracts, and contracts as opposed to betting. And B, we have the ability to take down any contract, any prop bet, euphemism, that we don't think is appropriate. And so we did it so that we could have more control and monitor the market more closely.
Great.
And with the Cleveland pitchers case, the data spotted that right away, immediately.
Right.
Major League Baseball discovered the spike right away.
Right.
You know, frankly, any player that does it, not only is it stupid, not only are they jeopardizing their career, but they're going to jail. They're going to get caught. And we've been, since what happened in both baseball and basketball, we've been doing some consciousness raising with our general managers, our coaches, and the players. And the point is, no matter how smart you think you are, we have the tools, and you will be caught. There is no question. So doing it is just plain stupid.
Great. I know we had a broadcasting-specific question that I'll let Nathan ask, because it's your question. So.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
What a great voice for broadcasting.
We already told them that.
You know, but the voice will make up for it.
Didn't we do this routine 3 hours ago?
It plays well with a bigger crowd.
Okay.
You know, growing up, for me, Doc Emmerich, Eddie Olczyk, and Pierre Maguire was kind of the broadcasting booth of hockey. Like, they were the voice of hockey for me, and obviously was very fortunate to call games with Pierre last year. Who were the voices of hockey for both of you growing up? And then now when you look at the broadcast partners, as far as the broadcasters themselves, who do you view as kind of being the, not unofficial, or the voices of the league right now as far as what they do?
Well, Doc Emmerich was our radio guy when I played in the American League, played for the Maine Mariners. Doc Emmerich was our radio guy, so I've known him since 1977. He's the gold standard for me. I think we're lucky in Canada. We've got two major play-by-play and broadcast play-by-play and color guy teams with the Hockey Night in Canada guys. I think Gord Miller's excellent. There's a lot. We're fortunate. A lot of local teams are good, and a lot of national teams are good. We're very fortunate. The broadcast partners we have are first rate.
I grew up in New York listening to Marty Glickman and then Marv Alpert. I'm much older. And you know, Sam Rosen, who for 40
Awesome.
years, and currently the crews on TNT and ESPN are good. They're really good. You know, I mean, everybody's got their favorites. But what's interesting is we get a lot of objections when we take games national, particularly in the playoffs, because a number of fans say, no, we don't want to hear the national guys. We want to hear our local guys who we've been listening to all season. And we have to say, too bad.
Yeah. All right. It's an interesting one. Do you believe Wayne Gretzky would have stayed at Edmonton if the salary cap was implemented earlier?
I don't. That's a good question, you know, and I don't generally answer hypotheticals because the answer can only get me in trouble. But I do think that he was moved to L.A. not because he needed or wanted more money. I think the owner in Edmonton needed to do the transaction to take care of his other business needs, and I think that's why the transaction happened. And
I agree.
right,
Yeah.
you know. The person in question would probably deny it, but I don't think Wayne was pushing to go to L.A. And I know he and Janet get a bad rap for that, but he's a Canadian through and through, and he was committed to Edmonton. I think it was really hard on him. Now, coming to L.A. was great for the Kings and great for hockey, but what people tend to forget, when he came to L.A., the NHL, in its infinite wisdom, didn't really have a major national broadcasting agreement. It was before my time. They were on a thing called Sports Channel America, which was in 6 million homes. It was the infancy in cable. And the owners at the time thought it was more important to have their local broadcasts than national broadcasts. So even though he was in the United States, most fans only got to see him when they were playing the local team, and that was an opportunity lost. By the way, he deserved the name The Great One, and he is a great person. I mean, the record, and when Ovechkin broke his goal record, he couldn't have been more gracious.
I remember working for Gary when we were tracking Wayne when he set the record. When he broke Gordie Howe's record, we were tracking him, same thing. Gary says, you have to go to the next 5 games. Remember we were in San Jose?
Yeah, no, I remember I had to go to a game in L.A. the night he broke the record, and I had a board meeting the following morning in New York, and I had to borrow somebody's plane to go back and forth in 24 hours. There's actually an article, there was an anecdote that was in Sports Illustrated. This is off on a tangent. So we land in L.A., and we're on a tight window because the crew was going to time out. So I had to take the plane, get to L.A. at the last second, get to the game, and leave the game immediately and get back. We land in L.A., and we don't have time for anything, and I have to go to the bathroom. But I didn't have time to do that, so I sat through the first period of the game, and then I ran downstairs to the event level, and this was in the old L.A. Forum, which was an old building, and didn't have big locker rooms. The locker rooms here would put that to shame 100 times. Anyway, so I passed the Vancouver coach's room, which was separate from the players' room, and I said to Pat Quinn, who was coaching Vancouver at the time, you mind if I use the bathroom? He says, no, and I go in. Unbeknownst to me, they leave to go to the game, and unbeknownst to the trainer, he locked the door and bolted it from the outside. So I am locked in the locker room, okay, pounding on the door. So, okay, I don't think there were cell phones then. And so they had to go out to the trainer who was on the bench to get the key to open the padlock to let me out of the locker room I was in. And the good news is Gretzky didn't score while I was locked in the bathroom, but shortly thereafter.
How do you address fans who are somewhat upset about the lack of physicality in the game today, since fighting used to be a more prominent element of the game?
Well, you're not distinguishing but two things that are distinguishable. The game is physical. There's as much hitting, I don't mean punching hitting, but body checking as there's ever been. The game is physical. There's less fighting because the game is so competitive, teams can't afford under the salary cap to waste roster spaces and dollars on players who can't do anything other than fight. So the types of fighting we have now are not typically staged fights. They're fights that happen in the heat of the moment. And I'm okay with that because it acts as a bit of a thermostat. 80% of our games don't have a fight in them. And it acts as a thermostat, and I'd much rather two guys square off who are skilled players than one of them in an act of frustration take his stick and hit somebody in the head with it. Because you got to remember, fast-paced, edgy game, players are encouraged to have physical contact. They're running at each other at up to speeds of 25 to 35 miles an hour. And by the way, they're carrying sticks. So fighting does have a place in the game to modulate the emotion of the moment.
I hate when they fight.
No, you don't. You love when they fight.
Great. So we got one question here on the newly formed Women's League. With the PWHL in the beginning of its formation and existence, have you provided the league any guidance or
Yeah,
any thoughts?
we were as helpful as we could be. There were two women's leagues. Neither one was doing particularly well. One went out of business. There were two groups. One was an association. One was the old league. They didn't get along. But Mark Walter, who owns the Dodgers and now the Los Angeles Lakers, stepped up and basically started the league, owns all the franchises, owns the league. And I think it's great. And in terms of their ability to start up, which they did in a matter of months, we were as helpful as we could be. We're fully supportive. We include them at our big events, and I think it's great. But we didn't feel the need to own it. The women felt they wanted their own league, their own way, in their own time. And we were good with that.
And if you haven't seen the product, it's wonderful. The women are fantastic.
And Brian actually represented the Players Association in the Women's League for the first 2 years.
With streaming services expanding and fragmentation of where fans can view the product, how do you plan to keep viewing prices affordable for fans in the future?
The marketplace will determine that. We make deals to maximize distribution. We've been streaming, we don't get credit for this. Our last deal with Rogers 12 years ago in Canada included streaming. Most people don't focus on that. Our deal with Disney, ESPN, includes streaming. And it's a balancing act. But it's clear, just as people had to pay for cable and satellite with all the cord cutting and cord nevers, streaming is the future. And streaming is good because more than linear TV, you can do more. You can provide feedback and purchase options and make bets. Ultimately, you can provide camera angles that are individually activated. You can get data as you want. And so streaming is going to ultimately enhance the viewing experience. Will you have to pay for it? Probably no different than cable or satellite, but that's the world we live in.
So two-pronged question here on Four Nations. How did you decide to change the All-Star format, and then what data did your team look at to judge the success of the Four Nations face-off last year?
Well, we didn't have data in advance because we didn't know what was going to happen, but we thought it would be good. Four Nations was a function of the fact that we had finally come to an agreement with the Players Association, who on international competitions are our partner. I don't mean just sharing revenues. They're our full-blown partner in planning and making decisions, which is a good thing. And so we had finally, after negotiations for a year or two, worked out going back to the Olympics with the IOC. We had agreed that we would do a World Cup every intervening 2 years. So Olympics, year off, World Cup, year off, Olympics, so on. And we knew that our best on best would be terrific and that our players very much wanted to represent their countries in an international best on best. And we said, we don't have enough time to do a World Cup, but in the season prior to the Olympics, we could put together a 4-team tournament where there were two great rivalries, Finland, Sweden, Canada, and the U.S. And we'll give people a sample, a taste of what to expect from the Olympics and from the World Cup. And so we knew we couldn't do the All-Star game and do that. So we decided, let's do that and give people a real taste of it. And it was terrific. I don't think we're going to do it in the intervening years. That's too much international competition. There was nothing wrong with our All-Star game. Unlike in some other sports, the format we were using was fun, it was entertaining, and the players played. And once it got to the third of the 3 games that we play for the $1 million winner take all, players decided, you know what, I'm here. I'd rather have my share of the $1 million than have nothing. And they would play, and it was fine, and our skills competition was good. And All-Star games are supposed to be fun and an opportunity to celebrate the sport. But we knew 4 Nations was going to be a winner, but you can't do that every other year.
One of our former executive in residences was your mentor, David Stern. Can you share some leadership lessons that you took from him and applied to your own leadership style at the NHL?
David was a great mentor and a great taskmaster. First and foremost, he understood the importance of relationships. He understood the importance of doing your due diligence and your homework before you made a decision. He understood the importance of executing the vision that you were creating, and he understood the importance of making the decisions for the right reasons, not because you want to make somebody happy and be political, but you're doing what you think is the right thing, and you have to be able to tell people things they don't want to hear, and even if you make a decision you know is unpopular and they don't like. And for lack of a better term, in a big group, you can't go around bullshitting people. You got to be true, you got to be authentic, and people will respect you even if they disagree with you. And you have to be responsive. You know, he was a lawyer, I'm a lawyer by training. I kind of treat the owners in the league like my client. I have a fiduciary responsibility to service them in the ways that a lawyer would service his client. And that's what he taught me.
How can mental health initiatives in the league be improved? What can the league do better to address the stigma around mental health with players?
Well, actually, we have programs that are accessible by players and their families. We do workshops. We have rookie orientation programs. Our counselors meet with the players. We have a substance abuse and behavioral health program. They meet with the players on a regular basis. Education, counseling, and having assets available is what we do on a regular basis.
Great. We got another 15 minutes here, and I'm updating these in real time. So again, if you have questions, just submit them on social. If you could change one thing about how NHL fans experience the sport today, what would it be?
I think they get a great experience. I'm not, if there was something I thought we should change, I would change it. So if somebody's got a good suggestion, something you're unhappy about, send me an email and we'll think about changing it. What would you change?
Don't send me an email. I get enough emails that piss me off.
All right, this one was actually for both of you, so for Gary and Brian. Can you discuss the development of the You Can Play initiative and its inception?
Well, I appreciate whoever asked that question. You Can Play was founded in the memory of my late son, Brendan, who had come out as openly gay. He was a manager of the Miami of Ohio student program, and he died in a car accident. And You Can Play was started in his memory to say, if you can play, you can play. In other words, if you're good enough to play on this team, we got a spot for you. Doesn't matter if you're gay, doesn't matter who you go to sleep with, doesn't matter who you go to church with. If you're good enough to play, you got a spot for you. So it's been a great success. The NHL is a proud participant. It's been great. Thank you for asking.
I have nothing to add other than it's been a great program, and it was a tragic loss for the Burke family, and this is a great tribute in his memory.
It's turned into something positive. You know, that's what the good thing is. Brendan's death turned into a positive for a lot of people. Gave a lot of kids the courage to come out.
Thanks for sharing that. This one was for Brian. Just can you share a little bit about what it was like being the director of operations for the league and how that was different than being director of operations for a team?
Well, you work for a team, it's very limited. You have probably 50 or 60 people you have to worry about, plus your players, scouts, coaches. It's much more limited. When I worked for Gary, you had to take the whole league into account when you made a decision. And one thing people used to say to me is, Gary, interfere. And not once in 5 years did he call me and say, you've got to give this guy 5 games, you got to bounce this guy. He'd call me and say, what are you going to do? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? He'd push you to think about the ramifications, but he left it to me. Never once did I get pressured or pushed into anything. And he's a great boss, a very compassionate guy, great listener too, which is hard for people like us. I'm not a good listener. But no, people in leadership positions have to learn to listen. It's really an important skill, and it's lacking in our industry. Working for a team, you only have one goal. You just want to win as many games as you can. The one good thing is the league requires you to have a background that takes into account some of the disparate groups, like the DI people, the causes that the league supports. They force you to adopt some of those programs. You can't not be inclusive if you work in the NHL. So it's a great thing, great pressure on the team to do the right thing.
One of the other things that I think is important and that I've always tried to do, Brian, maybe once or twice, would make a decision that I wouldn't agree with. And if it was not the right decision and it came down wrong and we got criticized, never for him or his successors or anybody who works with me would I hang somebody out to dry. That decision becomes my decision, and I always have my people's back. And
When I left, I said the same thing. When I left, I told Colin Campbell and Brendan Shanahan and Dave Nonis and all the people that work in player safety. I told them the same thing. I will never openly criticize a decision that you make, because I got that protection from Gary. No, I've ignored that rule since.
no, I'm just kidding.
A couple times.
Yeah, but that's because you became a media guy.
All right, this is kind of a fun player one. Favorite player to watch, past or present?
Well, I mean, watching Gretzky was always a delight. But present, I mean, you look at the skill level in our game. Cale Makar coming out of here. Connor McDavid. You know, he gets the puck and he takes off. You can see that he's got a different speed than everybody else. You look at Bedard, Celebrini, Schaefer. I mean, it's interesting. We've got a bunch of guys approaching 40, like Crosby and Ovechkin, and they're still going strong. We got a bunch of guys who are in their mid to late 20s, and they're stars, and we've got an amazing crop of young stars. So I never pick a favorite because, as I say in my family, I love all my children differently but equally, and I don't want to ever be accused of favoritism. But I think in terms of the skill level and the star quotient, it's never been better. And it's players of all different eras and ages.
I'd say Bobby Orr was the best player I ever saw.
That's fair.
Mainly because he changed the game.
But the problem is his career got cut too short, you know? He did change the game. But that's the beauty of sports, is it keeps evolving and regenerating year after year, generation to generation.
Thanks to coaches like Coach Carville.
Yeah.
This question's on global expansion we're seeing in the NFL, NBA. Just broadly, what would it take to expand internationally? Or what obstacles might go into setting up more NHL presence in global markets?
Well, there's a difference between expanding and having franchises and having a presence. We play regular season games regularly in Europe and other places. We're on media outlets, linear and digital, in 150 countries. We do grassroots programs. We put on events because we think it's important, particularly in Europe, that people are connected to the game because 30% of our players come from Europe, outside of North America, 30% roughly in the US, 40% from Canada. We don't want to do anything to disrupt that pipeline. And yeah, there's some nervousness there when we put on games and we say we want to have some of the World Cup games in Europe because there are really established leagues in in Finland, Sweden, Russia, Czechia, Switzerland, Germany. And they feel and have felt threatened by us, particularly when they hear the NBA is going to set up a league. And by the way, the European basketball leagues are feeling threatened by it and have said so. The NFL playing more games on a regular basis where they can be a bigger presence because they only play once a week. I was in Sweden 2 weeks ago when Pittsburgh and Nashville played 2 regular season games in Stockholm, and I asked for a meeting with the European League heads, and I wanted to tell them up front, we're not looking to expand here. I know the NBA is making you nervous and the NFL is making you nervous, but we're not your problem. They are, F1 is, soccer is. What we need to do is figure out how to work together to grow the games and make your leagues more successful and our presence worldwide more successful to grow the game of hockey. And it took down the tension and temperature a lot that we would reach out to have that conversation. And they understand and we understand the bigger goal is to grow the game of hockey, not for us to compete with the existing leagues who have great fan bases and do a great job of developing players who ultimately come to play in the NHL.
You were right, Gary. There is a league in France. It's just not very
I
good.
know, but they're not Exhibit A of
I could have played there.
No, I don't think you were that good.
This is a stadium one. Have you seen any differences in the suburban stadiums like Hurricanes and other markets as opposed to stadiums that are located in the city? Any differences in terms of how those have performed for the owners?
You know, it depends on the market. It's interesting. These things go in waves. Arenas used to be downtown, then they went to the suburbs, and then the movement was to put arenas back downtown. And now the plan is it's not just good enough to have an arena. You need to have restaurants and theaters and entertainment complexes and retail and offices and residential. So now the move is back away from downtown cities. I think it really depends on the market and how you want to service your fan base.
Both models work. The exterior building is better for exiting a large venue, get out after a parking issue. Getting out of a downtown venue is more problematic.
Although sometimes suburban arenas are a problem and stadiums when there's one road in and out, which frequently happens. So it's really more about what makes sense in the urban environment. Sometimes it pays to be downtown, sometimes it doesn't. There was, for a while, the 76ers in Philadelphia were talking about building a new arena downtown. And Comcast, who owns the Flyers, owned the arena that was on the south side across the street from the football and baseball stadiums, and people were used to going there. Ultimately, they came together and decided to build the arena where the existing arena is because they figured they could do a better job and create a more expansive experience for people who go there.
Public transportation can be a factor in that as well.
Time for a couple more here. Do you see any downstream negative effects to the NHL of what we're currently dealing with in the collegiate NIL landscape? And just how do you view that market moving forward?
What I think, well, there's a combination of two things going on. One is NIL, and I think the players should be fairly compensated in the sports where the schools are actually making money off of them. But I think this free agency chaos isn't good for collegiate sports because when you go to a school, you want a sense of continuity, of belonging, and you don't want hired guns coming in and leaving after a year. That's one. Two, the NCAA ruling that says now you can go play major junior hockey and then go to college, when it used to be if you went to play major junior hockey, you were a pro and couldn't go to college. I didn't like that because that was a decision a kid was making when he was 15 and 16 years old, and he didn't know what he wanted to do. So what I think is going to happen is there'll be more optionality for kids to go play major junior hockey and then go to college. It may mean that the college players are a little bit older, which is okay. We're in no rush to take them. And it gives players, in whatever path they take, a little bit more time to develop. And that's probably good for them and probably good for hockey at all the different levels. You agree, Coach? Good. Good answer.
It'll sort itself out over the
Yeah.
next couple of years, 3 to 4 years. But the transfer portal's a huge problem, like you said.
We want to build things based on values and family and all that.
Right.
It just tears it apart. There's no foundation. And then the problem is kids now grow up, they change teams every year from Pee Wee to Bantam. Like to stay somewhere 3 or 4 years is so against their normal feelings, and it's tough to overcome that.
And if you move every year to a different system, you never fully develop your skills. And that ultimately becomes a problem for us. But at the end of the day, I'd rather kids make better life choices at the right time as opposed to having an agent tell them at age 15 or 16, you got to go play for a major junior team in Canada and go bill it and be away from home. Okay, if you want to do that, that's great, but then go to college and get an education. And as I said to your players, you got to get an education because whether or not you have an NHL career or whether or not you have a long NHL career, at some point you're going to be done playing hockey or you may never have a chance to play it for a living, and you better have something to fall back on for the rest of your life.
Great, we're coming up. These are great questions. I wish I had time for all of these. These are great. Thanks, guys. One is selfishly for me, and I just wanted to ask this one before, well, we have you both here, but.
You couldn't do that in private before you came out here?
They got to hear it. They got to hear it. A book that actually Coach Carvel recommended to me a few years ago, Culture Code, is something that I've read as I lead up our grad program, thinking about
I
culture.
wrote a book too.
Yeah. Good, good.
And there'll be copies for sale outside.
Notice you're not shilling my book.
I don't have copies. We could do it. We pride ourselves on trying to grow the future leaders of the industry in this program. So as you have the group in front of you here, any words to them as to how they set up their leadership voice early in their career, how you become a part of a culture and add to it early in your career, and given that you've managed big organizations, big initiatives, how do you think about people who stand out early on and rise up? Are there commonalities you see in those early professionals?
Well, it's a great question, but I think I sort of answered it, because the answer is you need to be self-aware. You need to understand what's important to you. You need to have a passion for what you're doing, and you can't go through life with blinders on. You've got to be open to opportunities, and you have to be open to taking in information that you can process so that you make better decisions.
Great. Brian, any last words? Close us out.
I think when we look at drafting players, one of the things we look for that you didn't mention, I don't think you did, is empathy. One of the things we rate players very high on, things like manners. Okay, people are shocked. We evaluate a player's manners when they come in for an interview. Does he say hello? Does he shake hands? Does he make eye contact? Is he rude? If he's rude, we drop him down. So we want good people, not just good athletes. We want good people. The best interview I've ever had, I think, was Gabe Landeskog. He left the room, and Brad Treliving turned to me and said, "Why don't we let him run the draft for us? Just hire him, let him run the draft for us." He was unbelievable. So I think leadership is something you identify early on, and people speak up or don't speak up. They're right or they're wrong, and they fall by the wayside.
Great. To close us out, I'm going to invite up our department chair, Dr. Matt Katz, for some final words.
So thank you to everyone. I want to give a special shout out, to Liz Colleran, who has worked incredibly hard. For being an incredible guest up here and for elevating this event. And Gary, on behalf of the Mark H. McCormack Department of Sport Management, thank you again for serving as our executive in residence.